The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
The Dallas Cowboys made two massive hires on Tuesday.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
Two big hires that the Cowboys have made on Tuesday. Let's start with Matt Eberflus, who was kind of announced on Friday night that he was going to be the defensive coordinator. And then it was like, oh yeah, we have to follow these rules before we can announce that. Tom Pelissero has reported that the Cowboys and Eberflus are expected to reach a deal by the end of today. It's going to happen. First of all, what do you think about the Eberflus hire? Now that you've had some time to think about it, research, are you feeling good about the hire?
I think it's, the details are going to be important here, right? And I think it's an interesting hire to say the least. It's not a surprising hire in the sense that it very much follows kind of a template the Cowboys are looking for. And they love these kind of former head coaches that have a ton of experience. Even in the head coaching search, we got word that they were looking originally to hire a defensive head coach. I think that they just prefer these kind of older, seen it all defensive coordinators that have been around the league, have been head coaches. And I think it also provides you like a backup plan in case things, you think you have to
backstop, right? Like you don't have a bunch of completely unknown guys on the roster, right?
Yeah, and again, for a guy like Shoddy, who we've talked about, he has a ton of experience. He's been around the league, but he's never been a head coach before. So having another guy that on the coaching staff that has had head coaching experience, it doesn't really matter if it's positive or negative. Just having that experience, I think, is someone that it's going to be important. As far as Eberflus, the actual coach himself, and who he is, I think I was surprised, but again, more just because of the way he left Dallas, less than his qualifications. I think that he comes back and look, it makes some sense, looking at the situation after having only a single year with Mike Zimmer. If you aren't going to bring back Mike Zimmer, it makes some sense to kind of fall back towards 4 rusher, 7 drop, system that is back to a cover 3, cover 1 type system that you are comfortable with, that you previously had under Quinn. Now, things are definitely not exactly the same. These aren't exactly the same defenses. This is more of a Rod Marinelli flavor of that branching of the Tampa 2 coaches, right? But I think as far as the principles of playing fast, of a simplified defense that you're focusing more on individual techniques as opposed to complicated, sim pressures and blitzes and that sort of thing. I think it makes sense if you're trying to hit the ground running and try to get back up and going quickly because, as we saw at the beginning of last year with Zim's defense and frankly, again, my concern originally with something like what happened with Zim's defense was it could take a little while for guys to kind of internalize that stuff. I'm thinking that by making a move with Eberflus, it's closer to something that's familiar with a lot of guys on this defense, and that the hope is that at least for the starters, they can kind of hit the ground running because you're hitting the ground with something familiar.
I do think it's going to help. I think they're going to have a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball in terms of talent this offseason. We already know DeMarvion Overshown is going to miss a lot of time. Trayvon Diggs is going to miss some time. You're going to lose some free agents. So having a simpler defensive scheme, I think, will help rookie second-year guys get up to speed. My concern is when you get to the postseason and you're playing some of these better quarterbacks, assuming the Cowboys make it to the postseason, is this the style of defense that matches up well to stopping the Jaden Daniels and the Jalen Hurts and the Matt Staffords? What do you think?
That's a good question, because it does have elements. I will say this, like there are elements of what he likes to do, Eberflus likes to do versus Quinn that have some roots closer to a Fangio type defense, right? Like this is a guy that does like to call a lot of cover 2, a lot of shell coverage at times. He will mix it up. I think the big difference between Fangio and Eberflus is that Fangio is a master at rocking and rolling his safeties, at disguising coverages pre-snap, and then kind of giving you alternate looks and really kind of keeping you guessing about when he's calling cover two. Whereas Eberflus hasn't necessarily been traditionally that guy. I mean, I think there's been a trend these last 3 years with Eberflus towards more modern defense, less an increase of pass blitzes, less run stunts. I think he's using more quarters coverage to deal with modern quarterbacks that like to run the ball a little bit more, so you can get more eyes on the quarterback. But the one area where I would say that he kind of still is lagging behind, it just based on numbers and tape breakdown that I've been able to do so far, is in sim pressures and in the kind of fooling the quarterback pre-snap that is obviously a main component of some of the top defenses in the NFL right now.
I just wanted to share a note. I have a friend who his job is to scout the NFC North for a team. Here's what he said about Eberflus. He said he's a good defensive coordinator if he's not being asked to lead an entire locker room. It takes some away. And if you can continue to take some of his aggression from last year's defense in Chicago with more blitzes, I think he's going to be a very good addition for the Cowboys. Outstanding red zone defense, just a little conservative in between the 20s and late in games. That's where it reminds me a lot of Vic Fangio. There, like we see at the end of these game situations, like Fangio's defense you can move the ball up and down the field, but they almost always hold the red zone. Big emphasis on the linebackers and the secondary. And that's my question is like, what is that going to look like with the Cowboys in 2025? Because they've got so many injuries and free agents at those two spots. How quickly can he get those two units to play at an average level will probably determine their success next year.
Absolutely. And I think, what are you going to get out of the defensive line? I mean, I think that's really the big question. You still have a weakness in the defensive interior, and that's got to be filled, especially now with this defense. I mean, look, again, a re-emphasis back on the three technique, and your starting three technique is a free agent. So they've got to figure that position out first and foremost.
Which, by the way, do you think Osa is a good fit in this defense? Because I was looking back, like historically with Eberflus, and he's almost always had like these 6'6", 310-pound three techniques, like whether it was DeForest Buckner or Gervin Dexter with the Bears this year. Like, do we think a 6'1", 285-pound Osa Odighizuwa makes sense?
I think it does, but I think it certainly can't be your only solution. And I don't think that you can put him out there on a, 65 snap basis, like
Probably
he
not.
needs to be heavily rotated. And look, I think no matter what scheme you're playing, I've said this for a while, no matter what scheme you're playing, and if you bring back Osa Odighizuwa, you still need a defensive tackle coming out of this draft. So they've got work to do in the defensive interior still. I still have a lot of faith in Mozzie Smith maybe taking a step, getting a full offseason to actually work out a little bit, despite going through now his third defensive coordinator in 3 years. But I still think you need more at the position, whether that's a free agent or draft pick, regardless. And I think that is something that, regardless of who the defensive coordinator was, you needed that, but especially since Eberflus put such an emphasis on interior pass rush, you're going to need more bodies there.
So I'm giving this hire like a B, a solid B, because I'm not sure how many other options out there I would have liked more. I would have loved Mike Zimmer, but it's clear he doesn't want to return. So I think all things considered, this is a very good hire for the Cowboys. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it could go either way, honestly. I like the way that I think if I was getting Matt Eberflus from like 3 or 4 years ago when he left the Colts, now I would be like, but I think he's changed some things about him. I think your source had really great points. He's become more aggressive on third downs. He's opened up to the blitzing on passing situations. There's been an increase all 3 years that he was there with the Bears. So I think he's a guy that's probably in the middle of his Quinn, kind of revolution that like Quinn after Atlanta, right? So I do like the way he's trending, and I think he's a solid pick for all the other reasons we mentioned before.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. I used to go to comedy shows all the time. Me and my friends in college used to go all the time. It's a blast. You don't even need, alcohol. You just go and have fun and laugh. It's a comedy show. That's the whole point. Just go have fun. Gametime has a new called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Now it's time to fix the real problem.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast.
Pats fans, the days of prepping for a Super Bowl in these 2 weeks leading up to the NFL's biggest day may be a bit of a memory now here in New England, but that does not mean that there's not still a lot of work to be done at the offices at One Patriots Place in Gillette Stadium. The New England Patriots have their head coach. They have their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. Special teams coordinator is sticking around for another tour of duty here in New England. But a lot of the positional coaches are going to be new faces this year, some of which may be recognizable to you. And the Patriots clearly have positions of need both on the coaching staff and on the field. One area where the Patriots clearly need some help is along the offensive line, a line that allowed the highest pressure rate in the NFL last season at 40.7%. Yeah, yikes. There is a need to upgrade there, and it comes from coaching, and it also comes from personnel. The New England Patriots' most recent hire of veteran coach Doug Marrone may be the first step in trying to repair the damage that has been done to the Pats O-line. We're going to talk about that hiring today. We're also going to talk about the entirety of Mike Vrabel's staff and how a priority on experience may be exactly what this Patriots team needs to move it forward. Last but certainly not least, it's fun time down in Mobile, Alabama. The Senior Bowl is kicking off, and a lot of Patriots fans are eager to find out which position might be the strongest for the Patriots to scout. What is the priority position that a lot of Patriots scouts are going to be having their sharp eye on? If we're going to be talking O-line, we're going to be talking big round men up front. We're going to be talking to the expert, the only man that could help lend the wisdom, the counsel, and the insight that we need today here on Locked On Patriots, my good friend, the legend himself, Thomas Murphy. Thank you for coming to me in friendship on this offensive line-centric day on Locked On Patriots. Doug Murphy.
Happy to be here. Hope to help the ball club, man. Let's get into it. We're talking big round guys. We love big round guys.
Absolutely. And who does that better than you, my friend? You played the position. You coached the position. You know exactly what it takes to succeed along the offensive line. And let's start with the Patriots' most recent hire. Multiple reports now indicate that veteran coach Doug Marrone will be joining the staff of Mike Vrabel. Now, Marrone comes to town with a very extensive resume.
Dougie been around.
Marrone coming, yeah, absolutely.
Dougie been around.
2 previous stints as an NFL head coach with the Buffalo Bills and then again with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Served as the head coach of Syracuse University. He's coached offensive line for a number of different NFL teams and collegiate teams. Also has some college experience working with Nick Saban and also working with Bill O'Brien. So when you heard that Marrone was joining the staff, even though technically the Patriots have yet to confirm his exact position,
right?
I think everyone automatically just focused on the offensive line because that's where he played as a player, and that's where his expertise tends to gravitate. Your feelings on Doug Marrone coming in and what you think it means for the Patriots' plans on the line moving forward?
I was a little shocked. Somebody brought this to me last week, and I made a few phone calls, and I couldn't confirm that this was going to happen. But it was a little surprising to me that the Patriots would turn around and basically rob O'Brien the way they did. But no, it's a good hire. I think they're putting together a fine staff. It's just whether or not these guys can fall into line. Okay. And when I say fall into line, understand Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator of this team. I have no problem with Vrabel himself, staying away from the offensive side of the ball and focusing on, the big picture and focusing on defense where this team really needs some help from its head coach. But it's whether or not it's going to be, all our boats going in the same direction.
Mhm.
All right. And that's Josh McDaniels' direction. A lot of these guys have some serious, including Marrone, have serious West Coast style. They come from West Coast style offenses. They've run West Coast style offenses. So are we going to see a drastic change here? All right, is that what McDaniels is going to do? And we talked previously and before anybody else would of how diverse McDaniels is, how diverse the Earhart system is. It's no longer the Earhart system, folks. It's really no longer that. All right, this is the Brady's McDaniels system. All right, I'll dub it here, right now. This system can adapt and can be used like that. I just want to make sure that the people that they've brought in stay in their lane. All right, there are a lot of guys with a lot of street cred out there, and it's a lot of different voices, but there has to be one voice. All right, one voice on a coaching staff, and the others have to follow suit. Otherwise, it works against the program.
Very good point. And again, I think you're looking at the alpha in that room being Josh McDaniels.
Yep.
But I am glad that you mentioned the West Coast origins of Doug Marrone, because that's extremely important to remember. When you look at Doug's background and you look at the types of offenses he's worked in, very similar to the outgoing offensive coordinator here. Eerily similar to Alex Van Pelt in a lot of ways. They use a lot of the same protection schemes. They use a lot of the same run calls up front. I think this is going to benefit Drake May enormously.
Yeah.
Because Drake obviously is continuing to get to know the pro game. And I know that he's doing a great job and he's showing wisdom beyond his years, but I think it's important for Patriots fans to remember he's still a very young quarterback, learning potentially a complex system. If Drake comes in now and is working with Josh McDaniels, getting the opportunity to continue on in some of the same language, some of the same verbiage, and some of the same cadences that Alex Van Pelt had instituted in this offense, Doug Marrone comes in and uses some of that to build on what Drake does well. I think that can only make it easier for him to take that sophomore leap that a lot of people are expecting him to take. I think this makes it a little bit easier. I like this move for the Patriots in that regard.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. It's a smart move. This is a grown-ups table at Thanksgiving, all right, as opposed to the kids table that we had last year.
And I think it leads me quite nicely into my next question for you on this subject, my friend. And it's not just about the personnel in the coach's room. It's about the personnel on the field.
True.
This New England Patriots team on the field, especially when it comes to fielding offensive linemen, not exactly a robust cauldron of talent out there right now, Murph. As much as it pains me to admit, when you look at this lineup and you look at the line that the Patriots trotted out more often than not, I'm just going to give you a few rankings on each of the 5 linemen who started the most games for the Patriots in 2024.
Yep.
And folks, spoiler alert, this is not pretty. Start off with Michael Wenham, who obviously is your top offensive lineman. I still think that's the case.
It is.
He was graded number 33 out of number 77. Not terrible, but not the level you expect from your best lineman.
Not what you were paying for, that's for sure. But
you.
A lot of that has to do with this attitude that they took moving him around here and there and everywhere last season, and you just could not settle in. And it is really difficult to prepare yourself week in and week out when you don't know what you're preparing for, when when you can't focus 100% on your position, and it's they're two vastly different positions. That's what you're going to expect. I expect a lot better out of Mike this year.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bet as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is easy to navigate, plus knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. One bet you can look at, $5. The NBA tonight, Kings head east to take on the Sixers. Even amid all the turmoil with De'Aaron Fox, FanDuel has the Kings favored by 7. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Plenty of tough decisions awaiting from a personnel and roster standpoint.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast.
Klint Kubiak officially being announced on Sunday as the Seahawks' new offensive coordinator, replacing Ryan Grubb after just one season. Kubiak's bounced around quite a bit himself. This will be his 5th team in 5 years. But with that said, he has a sterling track record, particularly with quarterbacks. When we look at Kubiak now coming to Seattle and upcoming personnel roster decisions, as we've looked at before this hiring was made, Rob, John Schneider and Mike Macdonald have got some tricky decisions that they've got to make together, whether it starts at the quarterback position with Geno Smith and his future. Are you going to extend him? Are you hoping that he's going to play out his contract? Do you trade him to rejoin Pete Carroll in Las Vegas? DK Metcalf, there's questions about his future. Tyler Lockett, everybody, it's just been a foregone conclusion that he's not going to be with the Seahawks this next year. Does this change that at all? Noah Fant as a cap casualty candidate. There's a lot of players that had this offensive coordinator hiring riding a bit on what may happen with them in regards to their future with the Seahawks. And that's what's going to make these next several weeks fascinating now that Kubiak has been added to the mix.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I think that we have to, at first just kind of acknowledge the fact that Seattle has an awful lot of assistant coaches who are currently under contract. And so, I am fascinated to kind of see how the Seattle is going to play this. I think we have to focus in for a second on a Jake Heaps a Jake Peets, for example, Scott Huff, for example. I think that they're going to get an awful lot of attention as far as the coaches, as far as the cap casualties. I just don't know that you are going to see an awful lot of decisions made strictly based on Klint Kubiak being Seattle's new offensive coordinator. Sure, there's a possibility that a Noah Fant might be released. There's a possibility that, especially when you look at some of the players that have had a lot of success under Klint Kubiak in his previous stops in New Orleans and San Francisco and Minnesota, you don't see a player who fits in with the DK Metcalf type of a profile. But frankly, DK Metcalf is kind of a unicorn. And so, again, to me, that is one of the fascinating decisions that the Seahawks have to make at this point. When I look at some of the coaches that are available that I think might make some sense with Klint Kubiak, I think that there's an awful lot of them that he has coached with. As you said, he's been with several different clubs out there. I look at the players. However, I do think that Seattle already has some of the more physically gifted players that might be available in free agency. So to me, this is one of those decisions where Klint Kubiak is certainly going to have some power in the room, so to speak. But I also think that Mike Macdonald and obviously John Schneider are going to have the most power. So I really do think that this is kind of a fascinating conversation, whether it comes to coaches, whether it comes to the actual players that are on Seattle's roster, as well as the players that are available in free agency and the draft. Mike Macdonald and John Schneider are going to have the power here. Klint Kubiak's perspective, I think, is going to be powerful. But at the same time, I think that there's an awful lot of players who are currently on Seattle's roster, awful lot of coaches who are currently on Seattle's roster. They make an awful lot of sense just to retain and allow Klint Kubiak to use a different system to possibly be able to kind of, just allow those men, coaches and players to be that much more successful in 2025.
I love that you mentioned the word perspective, because really I think that ultimately is what Klint Kubiak is going to provide here. Klint Kubiak is not going to be going into John Schneider's office and be like, I absolutely want Noah Fant to be here, pound and fist the table. I don't want this job if Noah Fant's not going to be. He's not going to be weighing that kind of power, kind of clout in the building. That's just not going to be happening. Not that his advice is not going to be taken or that his input. Obviously, he could come in and say, hey, I think Noah Fant would be an excellent fit in my system. I think I can get a lot more out of him than what his predecessor, Ryan Grubb, did. or even in the previous regime with Shane Waldron, he may look at his past track record as a coach and say, hey, the proof's there. I've had a lot of success with tight ends that can catch the football. I didn't know if Fant could do more, but he's not going to be going in there making demands about that. That's certainly not going to be the kind of power that he's throwing around. But I honestly feel like, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I want to expand on it. I feel like when you look at this roster, a lot of the really good players the Seahawks have are already great fits for this system, which is why Klint Kubiak, in my mind, was one of the front runners for this position from day one. I felt like his scheme fit what the Seahawks have roster-wise. I mean, Justin Jefferson is, to me, probably the best receiver in the NFL right now. But he had 1,600-plus receiving yards in 2021 in Kubiak's system. You can't tell me that Klint Kubiak was not coming in and interviewing like, I'm really excited to see what I could do with DK Metcalf. He is going to be finding ways to get the football to him and not just use him as a decoy like we saw too often this past season. Ken Walker III, this is a coordinator that has run a lot of off-tackle plays. They're going to run a lot of zone concepts. That fits Ken Walker's game a lot more than the gap, under center, pound it game. And they're going to run a lot from under center. But I mean that physical between the tackles running style isn't going to be as big of a part of Klint Kubiak's system. So it feels like this was a good hiring for Ken Walker III as long as he can stay healthy. And then we mentioned the tight ends. They've had a lot of success. Noah Fant had decent numbers in the second half. Can you get more touchdowns out of him? Does it warrant the cap hit that he's going to be carrying? So I almost feel like this hiring makes it a lot more likely that you're going to see more of the band coming back together, so to speak, rather than the front office saying, you know what, we're just going to cut bait with a bunch of these guys and let's just start fresh. I don't see that. I will also say this. I think this was the best hiring for Sam Howell's chances of being on the roster this next year as well, because Klint Kubiak, the success that he had a couple of years ago with Brock Purdy as a pass game coordinator, he has worked well with young quarterbacks as well. You got to wonder if Sam Howell is somebody that he talked about a little bit during that interview process, but I'd be surprised if there are huge changes. Tyler Lockett is the one that I obviously think is going to be gone because the cap hit, and maybe they bring him back and Klint Kubiak is part of that decision-making process, but he's going to have to return at a cheaper price. But aside from that, it feels like most of these guys could be back next season.
It does feel like that. And that's one of the reasons why, in yesterday's show, we kind of talked about that. I thought that this was a big move for DK Metcalf and for Geno Smith. And, look, if you look at the success that Klint Kubiak has had in the past with Minnesota, with Denver, San Francisco, and most recently with New Orleans, if you just kind of look at the size, speed kind of factors here with the wide receiver position specifically, the average size, speed, of their wide receivers was 6'1", 205 pounds, running in the low to mid 4.4s. Now, that is neither Tyler Lockett, nor is it perfectly with DK Metcalf. It does fit in very nicely with Jackson Smith and Jigba, but of course, we knew that already. But I do think, to your point, Corbin, that I think any offensive coordinator is coming to Seattle is going to see number 14 and just be like, oh my goodness, what a physical phenomenon this young man is. And so I have got to be able to put him in a position to have some success. I would also acknowledge the fact that in his 4 different NFL stops to this point, that Klint Kubiak has been working with some pretty talented offensive line. All of the 4 teams that I just mentioned, New Orleans Saints, who invested top 64 picks, so first and second round selections, and Taliesin Fuaga, who was their starting left tackle, Trevor Penning, who was their starting right tackle, as well as Eric McCoy at the center, all top 64 picks. That's 3. Seattle only currently has 2, Charles Cross, left tackle, Laken Tomlinson, of course, I don't know, back in the 60s, it feels like, was a first-round selection of the New York Jets all those years ago. But still, the point is that Seattle has not invested as many early picks in the offensive line as, say, New Orleans did. San Francisco, when Kubiak was there, they had Trent Williams. They had Aaron Banks, the right guard position, going all the way back. Of course, they invested a first-round selection of Mike McGlinchey, who by the way, was at Denver when that Klint Kubiak was there. So again, you have Garrett Bowles at the left tackle position. You have Mike McGlinchey, who they brought over from San Francisco at the right tackle position. 2 first-round selections at the tackle positions. Of course, as we know, Quinn Miners has played very, very well. Wasn't selected in the top 64, but arguably should have been. He's developed into quite the player. Then go back to Minnesota, Christian Darrisaw, left tackle position. Garrett Bradbury at the center position is also a talented player who was drafted in the first round, and then Brian O'Neill in the second round. The point I'm trying to make here, Corbin, is while the skill position talent, you've seen kind of a barrage of different players. You have veteran quarterbacks who have been successful under Klint Kubiak, guys like Kirk Cousins, some of the best years of his career, were under Klint Kubiak, and then also some young quarterbacks, Spencer Rattler, Brock Purdy, of course. There's been some success here at the young quarterback positions there. Running backs, all of them, essentially, other than Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, but all of them have been second-round picks who have some slasher ability, make a lot of sense with Kenneth Walker III. But offensive line, I wonder if Klint Kubiak basically had the conversation with John Schneider and Mike McDonald and said, look, every team that I've had some success with has prioritized offensive line. So, again, just like we talked about in yesterday's show, this does feel like a hiring from Klint Kubiak. The Seahawks fans should be excited about, because this is an indication that Seattle is going to prioritize improving up front. And I think that all of us know that is what Seattle has to do if they're going to get anything better in 2025.